Welcome back to the Reflection Podcast. I'm Ed Blonsky, and I'm thankful that you are here. Hey, what do you think of when you hear the word Bible? I mean, we all have these ideas of what the Bible is. It could be a book on your nightstand, a book on your desk or coffee table or on your bookshelf. It could be something that you read on your phone or your tablet or on as a website. Where did that come from? And if only there was a place where we could go to learn more about that and to see all the different types of Bibles there are. Well, there is a place. It's called the Museum of the Bible, and it's in Washington, D.C. And I want to introduce you to a person that is part of the Museum of the Bible. In fact, he's the person who is one of the curators, bringing in the collection, different types of Bibles and the fragments of the ancient manuscripts of the Bible. So on this episode of the Reflection Podcast, we'll be diving deep into the Bible and the person who brings us some new information on the Holy Scriptures, as many people refer to them, on this episode of the Reflection Podcast. In the pastor's office with me today is Jeff Kloha. Welcome, Jeff. I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me on. Great to see you again.
It's good to see you too. We Jeff and I crossed paths at the seminary where we're not in the same class, but we were in a lot of the same classes, I believe, and had a lot of the same professors. And so Jeff is, while I went through the seminary and became a pastor, Jeff has gone a little bit of a different route. And so why don't you give us a little bit of background to you, who you are, Jeff, for our listeners?
Yeah, great. Well, maybe I'll start from the present and work back. Maybe easiest. So my wife and I live here in Washington, D.C. Susan, you have two daughters grown. One is in Chicago, one's in St. Louis. And I've been with the Museum of the Bible here for about 6.5 years now, I think it is. And prior to that, I was a professor of New Testament and provost at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, our alma mater, and did that for 18 years from 1999 to 2017. And prior to that, I was a pastor for 6 years and just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. So yeah, kind of did the seminary to pastor route, and then got the call to the seminary, and then was approached about this position, and here I am now. So not exactly linear, but that's how God works. Yeah.
It is very, very, very often how God works in a lot of different people's lives. Let's dig. I want to dig a little bit into your background. What really prompted you to go to the seminary and initially to be a pastor?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the church and grew up in the city of Chicago. My dad was a Lutheran school principal, and urban setting, not inner city per se, but urban. And I appreciated the opportunity for ministry in that kind of setting. So I actually wanted to get into urban ministry. I did a vicarage in Flint, Michigan, summer vicarage in Detroit, and really wanted to kind of go that route. I guess when I got to seminary, I got a little derailed with some of the academic stuff. So some of my professors encouraged me to do some additional work. And so I did a second master's degree at SEM, but then went to Cleveland and served a really outstanding congregation there. In fact, they had their 75th anniversary last month and went back, and for that was wonderful. And you got a urban setting, diverse school ministry, which had opportunity for community people coming in, new people coming in, preschool, those kinds of things. So I really just wanted to help people see how the gospel makes a difference in lives and in communities, and could be transformational, and just to be a part of that. So that was a lot of fun. I had a great congregation in Cleveland, very, very positive. So that was initially what I really wanted to do was bring the word to people who don't know it.
And that is exactly what you're still doing today. It's just sometimes we have a plan, and then God says, yeah, here's what the plan is going to be. And it can change throughout time as well, as you and I both know. So Give us a little bit of a background to the Museum of the Bible and what it is that you do there.
Yeah. Well, we opened here in Washington, D.C. Just about 6 years ago, November of 2017. And we're the largest Bible-focused museum in the world. We have 7 floors of exhibits, 6 floors of exhibits, seventh was restaurant, things like that, theater. Um, let me kind of give you our spiel on what we are. Our official statement is Museum of the Bible is an innovative global educational institution whose purpose is to invite all people to engage with the transformative power of the Bible. So that's a lot of words. But the real agenda here, the real goal is to present the Bible in a very public way, a very accessible way, so that people of a faith background, no matter what that faith background is, or no faith background, can come to see the Bible's impact, its importance, what it's done in history, what are its basic stories, and to encourage people to read it and to come away with knowledge, certainly, but also a desire to dig into the Word. And so it's a big operation, a 430,000 square foot museum. We have 55,000 objects in the museum. We work with international partners. We have a long-term partnership with the Vatican Library. We have an exhibit with them, with the Israel Antiquities Authority. So actually the largest archaeology exhibit of Israel outside of Israel is here in our museum. Long-term partnership with the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Constantinople, the Orthodox Church. We've done projects with say the nation of Malta, nation of Armenia. Right now we in exhibit with the Greek Parliament, and another one with the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. So yeah, that global aspect to show that the Bible is not just an individual thing, but it's impacted around the world, and to bring that here to Washington, D.C. for people to see.
All those places you're talking about in my mind are striking. That's where the Bible was written, basically, in those areas. Those are the hot spots. But it's interesting how we take it for granted, I think, as people. I mean, as a pastor, I've got several copies of the Bible all around me. Many homes, especially in America, have a Bible in them, but we don't always think about where it came from.
Yeah.
And I would presume that's what the Museum of the Bible is for, to help educate people that this is where it came from.
Yeah.
What is it that you do for the museum?
So my title is the Chief Curatorial Officer, which I don't know where that came from, but essentially I have a team that we do all the exhibits in the museum, the education programs and the tours and the lecture series, those kinds of things. We take care of the collection of artifacts and then also the research area. So we sponsor some research projects and some publication projects. So all told, there's about 45 people on my team, and very talented, very specific, a lot of different skill sets, but great group of people to work with.
Who started the museum?
Yeah, it really came out of the Green family in Oklahoma City. They were approached by some people about doing a museum. It wasn't kind of going anywhere, and they decided to take it on themselves and kind of give the initial impetus for the project. Really got going in a way in about 2010, and property was acquired here in 2013. Construction started in 14, and we opened up in 17. So. Of course, now lots of people involved. So we're an independent nonprofit organization, our own board of directors, and lots of people involved in the project. But yeah, the real impetus is with the Green family.
Why did they pick Washington, D.C. for the location?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, they did surveys and research onto where would you put a museum, and the top 2 results were New York City and Washington. Obviously, that's where people go to museums. The interest is always Washington, primarily because in New York, you kind of get lost, right? There's so much going on. And in Washington, people come, school groups come to DC and tour groups come to DC. And it's a little more, museums, more cultural than New York, which can be a little bit crazy. So So they were looking for property in both areas, and this became available. Perfect size, perfect location. We're 2 blocks from the Air and Space Museum, 8-minute walk from the Capitol building. So we're right in the heart of Washington, and great to be a part of this community here.
So if somebody's down on the mall, you're right there.
Yeah, we're right there. I mean, you could, we're on a metro stop, so you take the subway here, but we're right there. A beautiful view from our top floor of the Capitol building, the Washington Monument, and you could see it all. It's a gorgeous view.
It seems to make sense to me that that's exactly the place, especially in the United States, but really in the world, that God would want His word accessible to somebody. And of course, He does that through the churches and through the people of the church. But right there's so many people coming through Washington D.C. every single day. There's
Yeah.
God's word, and they get they get that history of it, I would assume. If so, take us on maybe a little virtual tour of the museum. When they
Yeah.
come in, what do people see?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a beautiful space. I mean, the design, the interior is just a beautiful space. But one thing the design goal was from the beginning was to, well, I'll give you my standard joke, right? When most people hear the word museum, they will often think, old, boring, dusty, right? Who cares? And when many people hear the word Bible, unfortunately, they often think old, boring, dusty. So what could possibly be worse than a museum of the Bible? I mean, it's like boring multiplied, right? So we knew that going in, and so the aesthetic is just a very appealing aesthetic. There's a lot of technology, video, interactivity, sound everywhere you go, experiential kinds of things rather than simply books and cases. So it's a very different kind of museum. It's a very modern kind of museum in that respect. And that's carried through the main gallery. So our 3 main areas of focus in the museum and the 3 permanent galleries are the history of the Bible, which is essentially how did the Bible start in the ancient Near Eastern world, and how did it become translated and spread really around the world to the work of translation still happening today. So that's fair to say the most comprehensive display of the history of the Bible in one place in the world. It's a very amazing gallery.
So it sounds like it's that new brand of museum, very
Yeah,
interactive, very hands-on.
yeah,
We both lived in St. Louis. The St. Louis Science Museum was very much like that as well.
yeah. Similar kind of feel, right? Right.
Yeah. And we're both from Chicago as well, the Museum of
Yeah,
Science and Industry. We grew up
yeah,
with that's the kind of museum. You don't just, it's not like
yeah.
the Art Institute where you go and you look at something and
Exactly.
move
Yeah,
on.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So you've
And
got,
then well, let
yeah,
me
go
give you
ahead.
the other floors. The impact of the Bible floor is how has the Bible impacted culture? So it's kind of snippets of 21 different areas of life where the Bible's had an impact. And the theme there is how is the Bible hidden in plain sight? So how does it show up in popular music? Bob Dylan, Nine Inch Nails. How does it show up in Hollywood movies? How does it show up in fashion and in Shakespeare and Harry Potter, right? So how has the Bible shaped our culture, even if you don't realize it? And we also talk about how the Bible intersects with American history on that floor. So kind of a chronological overview. And then the fun floor is if we call it that, the stories of the Bible floor. So we have a unique award-winning, we call it the Hebrew Bible Experience. It's a 30-minute, it's hard to describe. You walk into a space, there's video, graphics, sound, and it walks through the narrative of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Bible. And you go from Genesis, Noah, Abraham. It's amazing. It gets great feedback from guests. And we also have we call it the World of Jesus of Nazareth. You walk into a space that's a reconstruction of Nazareth Village in the first century. So full size, you interact with characters talking about life in the first century. So very interactive, very experiential, and again, want to give people a taste so that they want to learn more when they leave.
Obviously Well, maybe it isn't obvious, but to me it would be. You have a Bible there. So
Yeah.
what's in the collection? What kind of Bibles and manuscripts do you have
Oh,
in your collection?
yeah. I mean, uh, yeah, everything. I mean, we have our oldest, I'll say our oldest biblical manuscript is a third century copy of the Psalms in Greek. So it's the oldest Psalms in Greek actually in the world. And we have fourth century, third century papyri of the New Testament. We have one of the four oldest Hebrew codices in the world, a Pentateuch from the 10th century, which, having graduated seminary, the Leningrad Codex is what the Hebrew text is based on. Ours is one generation older. Beautiful copy. Um, all the way through fragments of Gutenberg, early printed copies. Luther is a big feature because he was so important for the history of the Bible. So it's pretty comprehensive. I would say the strengths are um, medieval manuscripts, very nice collection of medieval Greek, Latin manuscripts, Armenian, others, and then early printed books. So Tyndale, Luther, that kind of 16th, 15th, and 16th century early printing, very comprehensive in that area.
Now I would assume proficient in Koine Greek, the language of the New Testament, and the Hebrew of the Old Testament, Aramaic. Do you see from those fragments that our copies that we have today are accurate, and there's not a lot of change between those early forms of the Bible and what we have today?
Yeah, and this is actually my academic research. My PhD work is in exactly this area. So, uh, yeah, modern scholarship has really spent a lot of time and energy and come to the consensus that what we have for the text of the New Testament in particular is remarkably reliable, remarkably consistently transmitted. It's refined so that we know very well what the apostles wrote, and that's been handed down, for 2,000 years. Um, One reason we reached out to the Ecumenical Patriarchate is to highlight the continuity of the use of the Greek Bible in the Greek Church for 2,000 years. And they're essentially using today the same text they were using, 1,800 years ago. So it's great to be able to highlight that and to show physically, how the church has used these copies and handed them down generation to generation.
You said second century fragments, or
Yeah, third century
third
would be
century. So, and that's the 200s, right? 200s
200.
AD.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the last book of the Bible was written right around the end of the first century, I'm thinking.
Yeah, Revelation took place about the end of the first century, right?
So not that much removed, 100 years, maybe 150 years removed from the
Mhm.
the original autographs, as the academics call it, the original manuscripts.
Yeah.
Uh, how important is it for people in the church and then people maybe asking questions about the church? How important is it to show them that the Bible is reliable in this way?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if people question the Bible in that respect, it's an unfair criticism because it's simply not the case. And even the most kind of critical scholar will acknowledge that our New Testament texts are it's the same as what they were reading 1,800, 1,900 years ago. Um, so that's one element, but I think it's fair to say what's more important is not that we prove the Bible's accuracy or something, but that they actually read it. Right? It's the message that's key, and hopefully we can remove that as a stumbling block and open people up to reading it just on its own terms. That's really all we're trying to do, and I think that's kind of the church's job in general is to just get people to the Word.
Hmm. I agree. Uh, what as you walk through the collection and you have seen what's in the collection, what's the most surprising thing you found in your collection?
Well, there's been good surprises and bad surprises, I guess, but like any collection. That's an interesting question. I would say most surprising thing. I mean, I knew a bit about the collection when I joined the museum. Um, So surprising. Um, I'd say, since my background is early church and Greek and that kind of thing, I'd say what's been surprising is the printing press, all the creativity and urgency to get the word out in the early 16th century, Luther, Tyndale, just how quickly that spread, how quickly it went from a very expensive proposition and became an impetus for printing, literacy, really. The emphasis on literacy for the general population is in large measure inspired by the desire to have people read the Bible. So again, because my academic work was, I think, narrowly focused, just seeing how just culturally transformative the Bible has been, especially in that, kind of 15th, 16th century. So we got the Reformation, right? And we usually think about, the gospel and all that kind of stuff. But equally important, and maybe more important, is this whole getting the Bible out there for people to read on their own, and the effort and success of that project.
God speaks to people. We see this all the time, and we hear the stories of it in the Bible, of speaking through dreams, speaking through direct, just the voice from heaven. But is it your experience in looking at all these fragments and manuscripts and the collection of the Bible at the museum, that the Bible was meant to be read, written down and read?
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly written down, and I would maybe change that a little bit, both read and heard. For the vast majority of the history of the church, very few people could actually read. Estimates are that in the Roman Empire, only 5 to 10%, maybe 15% of the population could read. So when Paul writes a letter, say to Galatia, that's being read out loud to the congregation. And you see that even how the manuscripts are laid out, how they're produced, and so I'd say yes, definitely read, but also heard, right? And they're not written as a reference book. They're not written as something to be put on a shelf. They're to use the words of the early church, it's the living voice, right? The living voice of the gospel, and it's a call to us to listen.
So let's switch gears just a bit. Why do you do this work? Why did God call you, you think, or what is it that God did for you to get you into this position? Why you?
Yeah, you have to ask him, honestly. I can try to guess, and it in some ways I've had 3 completely different careers, right?
Mhm.
Past professor and now museum. But the thread has always been the scriptures, right? The Bible, I mentioned, I was blessed to have a father family who raised me in the faith, and attended a Lutheran high school in Chicago where I learned Latin and German in high school, right? So kind of got that exposure to the languages, and went to Concordia Ann Arbor, and did some classical Greek and then Koine Greek and more Latin and then Hebrew, and so just had that real interest in studying the Bible, and then especially teaching the Bible. And so I think that's the thread. Is I just really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy help opening the scriptures up to people, and it seems to work. I mean, I teach Sunday Bible study at our church here in the DC area, and speak at pastors' conferences, and so I like the hands-on practice of teaching, and what's appealing about this is it's teaching in a kind of a different way, right? Nobody's trying to put the Bible out there in a public space the way we are here. So it's I mean, I don't know why me, other than the Holy Spirit works when and where He wills, I guess.
Absolutely. I agree. It's just that from looking at your career and the training you have had, I see the common thread as well, that God has been training you and putting you in these different positions and is qualifying you. Basically, he's called you, but now he's going to qualify. You weren't qualified, and then he said, okay, I could use this guy. He says, I'm going to use Jeff, and then I'm going to give him all these gifts and experiences to get him. As a pastor, you've got a certain amount of people that you're influencing and interacting with. As a professor, that's a little bit bigger. There's more people involved, and you're involved in the training of men to become pastors and women to become deaconesses and professional church workers. And now you seem to be on a large stage where, and it's interesting, like you said, you're not pushing the Bible out into the public square. People are coming to you. They're
Right.
coming in to see the Word of God, and you're in a very unique, qualified position to do that.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
mentored you along the way? What are some of the people that kind of guided you? The reason I ask is that people don't always realize how the people in their lives are really helping them in very specific ways. Who was it for you?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I was going to kind of add that to your comment, that it really is the community, God's people who shape and form us, help us discern, what God would have us do. And I mean, I'm simply the product of the church, right? I mean, uh, uh, so my father certainly very, very dedicated servant, and my grandfather, who actually was a car mechanic his whole life, and but taught Sunday school, did door-to-door evangelism, Kennedy evangelism back in the day, and welcomed refugees from the Vietnam War, helped to resettle refugees up in Michigan, and just a very outstanding model of Christian individual, very, very influential. Um, uh, and then of course, when you get to university and seminary, professors can be very influential. Jim Veltz, still a good friend, and he's the one who kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said you should do grad school, instead of doing urban ministry. And so kind of the rest is history. My doctor father, Keith Elliott, at University of Leeds in England, wonderful person. Um, and and then even people here, people like Mike Holmes, who's tremendous scholar of the New Testament, who I met 25 years ago at academic conferences, is still affiliated with the museum here. In fact, I talked to him on Friday. He's kind of the reason I ended up here. He gave him my name, and just a tremendous model of a Christian individual, servant heart. So yeah, I mean, many people along the way, and all who help. Here's a good idea. Here's not. Here's something you should consider, and opening doors that I wouldn't have expected. So I think it's just like I said, I have no idea how all this happened. It just kind of. Yeah.
If I were to give you a large billboard and you put it up on the building and the Capitol people can see it from there, and so they're going to be taking a quick glance at this. So it's sort of what is it that you would want the world to know? This is in a short, pithy statement, sort of what do they call it? Like a vision statement that's got to be in few words.
That's an interesting question. I mean, on one sense, we do that at the museum, but we do it in a way that doesn't, it's not churchy, right? We don't want to turn people off. We want them to see this as an impressive cultural place and walk in the door. On the other hand, we had this in the gospel reading yesterday, right? Well, we had the baptism. No, we had John the Baptist. But in Mark, the first thing Jesus says in the Gospel of Mark is, the time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is here. Repent and believe in the good news. And that's obviously very churchy, and most people won't know what that means, but that's really the key message, right? God is working. He's done it in Christ, and it's time to get on board, right? Because cool things are going to happen. And I'm not a marketing guru. I'm not sure how you get that on a billboard, but somehow to convey confidence and excitement at what God is doing. I think too often we in our day and age we get all, oh, the world is terrible and the church is declining and everybody's against us, and as honestly as I look back at church history, um, we have it way better than almost every generation of the church. And I know we like to kind of pity ourselves or something, but the opportunities in front of us and the things that are happening are really incredible. And to focus on what God is doing rather than what we wish were happening, and have a little confidence. I mean, it's I like to tell people when the Apostle Paul wrote the first letter to the church in Corinth, estimates are there were maybe 50 or 60 people in the church at the time, and he says, right, you are those upon whom the end of the ages has come, right? That God is working here, and the church goes from 50, 60 people in Corinth, probably less in Philippi, and now it's billions. I mean, and how did that happen, right? And why should we not expect it to continue, right? So I'd say that would be my message overall, is to be excited about what God is doing and get to work.
Yeah, we are in a unique position because we have 2,000 years of history, 2,000 years of artifacts that we're kind of built upon. And it's amazing talking with other people last year around the Reformation time, the whole impact that Luther had translating the Bible into the language of the people, what an impact that had. It raised literacy rates, for one, because people
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to read so they could read their Bibles. And then it changed the world, at least the Western world. It certainly influenced the rise of modern Europe and, of course, the United States as well. So the Bible is a book, and I want to ask you, what 3 books either you're reading now or you would want to give to somebody to read, to gift them? We just had Christmas, so what kind of books might you give away?
Books of the Bible,
Anything,
or
anything you want.
okay. Um, well, actually, maybe this sounds weird, but most of my reading is actually non devotional reading. I prefer just to read on my own, read the Bible on its own.
Sure.
So I don't know, I kind of keep those worlds separate a little in some ways, I guess. But um, I would say for books of the Bible, if I could go there, uh, yeah, when I was a pastor, I did adult confirmation class, and then first thing I would do with new groups of people in the church would do a Bible study on Philippians. And I taught that in my church last year. It's a beautiful book. It's very positive. Paul talks about rejoicing. He talks about dealing with challenges and how God sees us through those. Very clear presentation of Jesus Christ as Lord, of the gospel. And it's short, so you can get through it, and it's just a great little book. I think it's one of the doing a camp workshop on that this summer up in Michigan again. So it's just fantastic stuff. And I learn something more every time I go through it. And I'd say for the Gospels, I really like the Gospel of Mark. Again, it's a lot of motion. It's quick. A lot going on in that book. And again, focus on Jesus and the kingdom. And then, I don't know, third book, I guess, and this came up, I'm teaching parables right now, so not specifically a book of the Bible, but it came up last week in the parable of the persistent widow, who goes to this judge and keeps pestering and pestering and pestering and complaining. And finally, the judge, even though he's unjust, grants her request. And I pointed out that in the Psalms, you often have this kind of prayer to God of praying, sometimes even complaining, right, being angry at God, and that we should read the Psalms as a model for prayer. Yeah, sometimes there's beautiful praise, sometimes there's anger, sometimes there's complaining, sometimes there's pleading, right? And so I think the Book of Psalms, and that's part of my daily devotion is to read parts of the Psalms on a regular basis, and to kind of have that language and that frame of mind as we approach God. I think is important. So Psalms, Mark, and Philippians would be my three books.
Are there any books about the Bible that you would recommend or give to somebody to help them to kind of keep alongside when they're reading the scriptures?
Yeah, boy, that's a depends on kind of what your goal is. Actually, one book I'd really strongly recommend, and it was influential on me, is Martin Franzmann's book on Follow Me. Martin Franzmann was a professor at Concordia Seminary in the 50s and 60s. Beautiful way with words, and had a way of summarizing the content of the Bible very clearly but accurately. So his Follow Me is just a devotional commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, and really lays out what the gospel is, what the Christian life is. Beautiful little book. I would highly recommend it. And you can find it online, cheap. His commentary in Romans, likewise, beautiful little commentary. He reduces all the technical, kind of confusing things in Romans down to very, very straightforward, very helpful material. So I really like Martin Franzmann. He's, again, a good writer, but also a good teacher. I found his work very helpful.
My first experience of Martin Franzmann was as a hymn writer.
Yeah.
And then it opened up when I got to seminary. It opened up, wow, this man was a teacher and a writer, and not just a hymn writer, and so important. And so I'm going to put links to those in the show notes as well. I do appreciate you mentioning that for people to read, if they were getting introductions or just coming to the Bible, to read Mark, the Gospel of Mark. So often I hear new Christians or people that are really exploring what the Christian faith is, and people recommend read the Gospel of John, read the Gospel of John, and it's like, I don't know that I would do that, because the theology of John is incredibly deep. You get to John 6 and you're going to lose people. And just as Jesus lost a lot of people on not only the feeding of the 5,000, but then the follow-up with that. But Mark really just, man, it goes. It's 16 chapters and it just moves.
Yeah, it goes. Yeah. And it doesn't dwell on things, it picks up themes. I mean, each gospel is written for a specific purpose and audience. And Mark, I think, is a good one for that. The introductory, Luke in some ways as well, if you want a little more kind of structured presentation. But I think those are the two I would start with.
And that's sparked something, because Mark and Luke, both those gospels were actually integral in the storyline of Paul Meyer's books on the skeleton in God's closet. That there was the first book, there's a lost page of Mark. And then Luke was with the Constantine Codex, that there's Luke, and then there was Luke Part 2, which is the book of Acts. And then part of the plot device in his story there is that there's another edition of Acts, a volume 2. So that leads me to ask, do you think we're going to find more manuscripts that we don't have already of the scriptures? Are they hidden somewhere, do you think, around the world?
Manuscript copies of the New Testament or additional books?
I guess both, but maybe, we have copies of the books. Are we going to find older manuscripts of what we have already, I guess, is a better.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we'll continue to find fragments, small pieces. Actually, a lot of the materials that are being published today, small fragments, were actually excavated 100 years ago, and scholars are still kind of sorting through those finds. So occasionally there's a new item published, but they tend to be, okay, we already knew that, sort of a thing, additional evidence, that sort of a thing. The reality is the only place that you're going to find older material like papyri is in a dry climate like Egypt, and that's pretty much been excavated out. With the high water dam they built, the water table is rising, so it's very unlikely that we're going to find more materials that are older. Same thing for Hebrew Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls were a huge discovery. but the Israeli archaeologists have gone through all the caves now. They've made sure there's nothing else left, and so I would say the possibility of finding new materials is pretty remote. And when I teach this topic, I usually tell people that if you see a news report of some amazing new discovery, it's either way overblown or just flat wrong. Uh, yeah, there's not much. I would say not much more chance of finding something in our current technology, current situation.
Okay, well, fair enough. And I just think it's fascinating. We kind of went through that period with the Da Vinci Code and people
Yeah.
starting to look at the non-canonical, I guess is is
Mhm.
the word, the big church word for it. But it seems like that we've kind of faded from that we're past that. And there's a very good reason why we don't consider those on the same level as Scripture, the 66 books we currently have. Um, how can we find out more about the Museum of the Bible?
Well, the easiest way would be to go to our website. One big long word, museumofthebible.org, and information about our exhibits, about when to visit, tickets, tours, special exhibits going on. All those kinds of things are on the website. Even we have a collections page. We have about 900 of our objects are online. You can see pictures and descriptions. We got videos, some programs up there. Do a podcast. So there's a good bit of online content, but then a lot about coming to the museum on that website.
So if somebody's going to be coming to DC, how should they plan to visit the museum?
Well, it is a very large space, and you really can't do it justice even in a day. But really, the way we designed it is, if you want the kind of more academic kind of things, you can do the archaeology, and we got that. Very traditional museum gallery. But if you got, 8, 10, 12-year-old kids, there's go to Hebrew Bible, go to the Washington Revelations, the ride through Washington, the Nazareth Village, right? So there's, I would say plan on a good afternoon or morning, and get lunch here if you want. But it's not the kind of museum where you go to for an hour, see one or two things and leave. It's very experiential, and people tend to spend a good 3 to 4 hours here as a typical visit.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Anything that maybe I should have asked and I didn't get around to?
I don't know. We covered a lot.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. All good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here with us, Jeff, and God's blessings as you continue to do His work through the Museum of the Bible. And it was good to see you again.
Good to see you. Blessings, Ed. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Jeff Kloha as much as I did. What a fascinating place, the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. And Jeff is one of those who bring in the new items for the museum, the fragments and the manuscripts that make up our Bibles today. If you'd like to know more about the Museum of the Bible, there is a link to their website in our show notes, as well as links to Jeff's page where you can find out more about Jeff Kloha, and also links to the books that he mentioned also in this episode of the Reflection Podcast. The Reflection Podcast is produced by St. Matthew Lutheran Church in Hawthorne Woods, Illinois. We'd love to have you come and visit us. We are in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. We're about an hour northwest of downtown Chicago, but only a half hour from O'Hare Airport. If you happen to be in this Midwestern city on the plains, we'd love to have you come and join us at St. Matthew. Go to our website to plan your visit. It is stmatts.net, stmatts.net. If you're not in the area, you can still find out more about us at our website. All our worship services are streamed. Many of our Bible studies are live streamed, and our devotions and other podcasts that we have from St. Matthew. I'm Ed Blonsky. Thanks for joining me today. And join me again next time for another fascinating conversation with another fascinating person that reflects the love of God. Thanks for joining me on the Reflection Podcast. God's richest blessings to you.